Daniel Carter yanked his car door open, stepped out onto the dark highway, and shouted into the night. Not at a stranger, not at a threat, but at a woman on her knees in the middle of the road, papers flying around her like a storm she refused to cry about. "Hey, stop, don't move." She looked up. Her eyes weren't scared, they were furious. And the first words she said to the man running toward her in the dark, the man who had slammed his brakes hard enough to leave skid marks on Route 9, were not "thank you." They were not "help me." They were, "Are you flirting with me right now because this is a terrible time?" Daniel froze mid-step. And in that 1 second on a broken highway at 11 at night, with her laptop on the asphalt and her dignity held together by sheer force of will, everything between them began. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it hits you somewhere real, subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. The highway outside Greenfield, Ohio, didn't have streetlights past mile marker 14. Daniel knew that road, the way he knew the sound of his daughter's breathing at night, instinctively, without thinking, the kind of knowledge that lives in the body instead of the mind. He'd driven that stretch of Route 9 400 times since he moved to the area 8 years ago. Never once had he seen anyone walking it at this hour. So when his headlights caught the shape of a woman about a quarter mile ahead, shoulders squared, chin-up, bag strapped across her chest, like she was daring the dark to say something, his foot eased off the gas before his brain even registered the decision. He wasn't a man who acted on impulse. He hadn't been, not since Emma died. But something about that silhouette stopped him cold. He slowed to a crawl, watching through the windshield. The woman was walking fast. Too fast for someone who wasn't afraid, but with her head held too high for someone who would ever admit it. Her right hand gripped the strap of a bag that looked like it was pulling her sideways. Her left hand was clenched at her side. Then the strap gave. He heard it, or maybe he imagined he heard it. A sharp snap, and the bag dropped, and when it hit the pavement, the zipper exploded open, and everything inside scattered across both lanes of Route 9. Papers. A laptop case. A planner. Pens rolling towards the white line. A small thermos that bounced twice and went still. The woman stood there for exactly 1 second. Then she dropped to her knees and started picking everything up. No sound. No curse word. No frustrated cry into the empty night. Just silence and motion. Her hands moving fast and efficient, like she'd already decided that whatever she was feeling didn't matter as much as getting it done. Daniel pulled over. He sat in the car for a moment, engine idling, watching her through the passenger window. She hadn't looked up. She didn't know he was there yet. He thought about Emma. About the night she called him from a gas station parking lot at 2 in the morning because her car wouldn't start, and she'd been sitting there for 45 minutes before she finally admitted she needed help. "Why didn't you call me right away?" he'd asked her. And Emma had smiled that soft, tired smile of hers and said, "Because I kept thinking I could figure it out myself." He got out of the car. The woman heard his door, and her head snapped up immediately. In the glow of his taillights, he could see her face clearly now, Maya Brooks from marketing. He recognized her from the 3rd floor. They'd nodded at each other in the elevator maybe a dozen times over the past 2 years. He knew her name the way you know the names of people who occupy the same building without ever really sharing the same world. She was already on her feet. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was steady, almost aggressive in how steady it was. "Okay," Daniel said. He crouched down anyway and picked up a folder that had slid toward his feet. Maya watched him. "I said I'm fine." "I heard you." He handed her the folder. "You drop this." She took it. Her jaw was tight. She turned back to gather the remaining papers, and he noticed her hands were shaking. Not from cold because it was July, but from something she was working very hard to hold together. Daniel didn't move toward her. He stood beside his car and waited. "What are you doing?" Maya asked without looking at him. "Standing here. I can see that." She shoved the papers into what remained of the bag's main compartment, holding the broken strap together with one hand. "You don't have to do that." "I know." She finally looked at him. Really looked at him the way people rarely looked at each other, like she was trying to find the angle, locate the motive, understand what it was going to cost her. "Are you flirting with me?" she asked. Or are you actually trying to help? The question landed differently than she probably meant it. He could hear what was underneath it, not accusation exactly, but something older and more worn. The voice of someone who had learned that when a man was nice to her, there was usually a punchline coming. Daniel thought about what to say. He didn't say, "No, of course not," because that would have been defensive. He didn't say, "Can't it be both," because that would have been cute, and she didn't need cute right now. He said, "I know what it feels like to be somewhere you don't want to be, with more than you can carry, and nobody stopping." Maya stared at him. "I live out this way," he continued. "I'm not going out of my way. If you want a ride, there's one available. If you'd rather walk, I'll get back in my car." She looked at him for a long moment. The highway was silent around them. Somewhere in the trees, something moved. A car passed in the opposite direction, its headlights sweeping across both of them like a brief judgment, and then it was gone. "The last bus left 20 minutes ago," Maya said finally. "My Uber canceled twice." "Okay. My apartment is on Clement Street, by the water tower." "I know where that is." He moved to the passenger side and opened the door. She hesitated. He could see her calculating not whether he was dangerous exactly, but whether accepting this made her something she didn't want to be. Dependent. Grateful. Owing. "I don't need rescuing," she said. "I'm not rescuing you," Daniel said. "I'm giving you a ride. There's a difference." Something shifted in her face. Barely. A millimeter of something releasing that had been held very tight. She picked up her broken bag, tucked it under her arm, and got in the car. "Joel!" He pulled back onto Route 9, and neither of them spoke for a minute. The radio was off. Daniel didn't turn it on. He'd learned years ago that silence wasn't something that needed to be filled. It was something that needed to be respected. "You work in project management," Maya said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, 3rd floor." "I'm on 3 too." "I know." She glanced at him sideways. "You know my name?" "Maya Brooks, marketing specialist. You've been there almost 4 years. How do you know that?" "I pay attention," he said. "It's kind of my job." She settled back slightly. "What's your name? I know your face, but I can never remember." "Daniel Carter." "Carter." She tried it. "Okay, Daniel Carter who pays attention." She looked out the window. "Why were you at the office that late?" "Project deadline." "You?" "Same." She laughed, but it was a short, humorless sound. "We were probably in the same building for 12 hours and never once talked to each other. We're talking now. Because my bag broke on a highway. Things have a way of happening when they need to." Maya turned to look at him. That's a very philosophical thing to say to someone whose laptop might be dead. He almost smiled. "Is it dead?" She pulled out the laptop case and unzipped it. The screen lit up when she opened it. She exhaled slowly. "It's alive," she said. "Good. 3 weeks of work on that drive. Back it up when you get home. Obviously." But she said it lightly, and some of the tension had left her shoulders. She closed the laptop. "Are you always this calm?" Daniel thought about that. "I used to not be," he said. She waited, clearly expecting him to go on. He didn't. "Okay," she said. "Mysterious calm project manager. Got it." He turned onto the county road that would take them toward Clement Street. "How bad was the bag?" "The strap is gone. I can probably get it repaired." She looked at the ruined zipper. "Maybe." "There's a place on 4th called Mended. They do bags. Good work, fair price." Maya looked at him again with that measuring expression. "How many things do you just know off the top of your head?" "I have a daughter," he said. "Kids destroy everything. You learn where to get things fixed." The word daughter changed the air in the car slightly. Maya registered it. He saw her process it, recalibrate something internally. "How old?" she asked. 8. "What's her name?" "Lily." "Is she—" Maya stopped herself. "She's home with a neighbor," he said. "I try not to be the dad who's never there, but some weeks the project deadline wins." "That sounds hard." "It is." He said it without self-pity, just cleanly. But she's a good kid. She understands more than I give her credit for." Maya was quiet for a moment. Outside the town was beginning to show itself the gas station on Mercer, the 24-hour diner, with the broken O in its sign, the water tower rising above the tree line. "Clement Street is the next left," she said. He knew, but he followed her direction anyway. He pulled up in front of a 3-story building with a red door and kept the engine running. Maya gathered her things, then paused with her hand on the door handle. "Thank you," she said. And he could hear what it cost her, not much maybe, but something. She was a woman who had learned to make the math work without relying on extra variables. "Sure," he said. She got out and then turned back, one hand on the roof of the car. "For the record," she said, "you never answered my question." "Which question?" "Whether you were flirting or actually trying to help." He looked at her. She was standing in the amber light of the street lamp, her broken bag under her arm, her chin doing that thing again, raised just enough to tell the world it hadn't won. "Does it have to be one or the other?" he said. Maya stared at him for one full second. Then she closed the door and walked up the steps without looking back. Daniel sat in the car until the red door closed behind her. Then he drove home. The next morning, Lily was already awake when he came downstairs, which meant she'd had the dream again. He could tell by the way she was sitting at the kitchen table, very still, her cereal untouched, her small hands wrapped around a glass of orange juice, like it was the only solid thing in a room that kept moving. He sat down across from her. "Hey," he said. "Hey, Dad." "Sleep okay?" She shrugged, which meant no, but she didn't want to talk about it. He didn't push. Some mornings you just needed someone to sit across from you and be present, and Daniel Carter was good at that. It was perhaps the skill he'd worked hardest to develop in the years since Emma. He poured himself coffee. "You were late," Lily said. "I know. Mrs. Hendricks okay?" She fell asleep watching her show. Lily poked at her cereal. "I covered her with the blanket from the couch." "That's my girl." Lily looked up. "Did something happen?" He thought about Maya on the highway. The papers scattered across the asphalt. The way she'd said, "Are you flirting with me?" with this armor in her voice that had clearly taken years to build. "I gave someone from work a ride," he said. "Her bus left without her." Lily considered this. "Was she nice?" "She was real," he said. "That's better than nice." Lily thought about that for a moment, in the way 8-year-olds thought about things, with full sincerity, no performance. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied, and went back to her cereal. Daniel drank his coffee. He told himself he wasn't thinking about Maya Brooks. He was absolutely thinking about Maya Brooks. The office on Monday was the kind of fluorescent-lit, open floor plan environment that Daniel had learned to navigate by keeping his head down and his work impeccable. He was respected, he knew that. People brought him problems because they trusted he'd solve them without drama. His team liked him. His director, Frank Mullins, a 60-year-old man who'd built his career on taking the path of least resistance, thought Daniel was the ideal project manager, capable, quiet, and unlikely to make waves. Daniel was good with that arrangement. He wasn't ambitious in the conventional sense. He wanted to do good work, go home to his daughter, and sleep through the night, which happened less often than he'd like. He didn't notice Maya when he walked in. He noticed her when Frank Mullins walked past his desk toward the marketing section and said loud enough for the open floor to hear, "Brooks, I need those revised numbers by noon. Yesterday's version was a mess." Daniel looked up from his screen. Maya was at her desk, headphones around her neck, already looking at Mullins with an expression that was perfectly calibrated, professional, attentive, absolutely unreadable. "I'll have them by 11, she said. Mullins walked on without acknowledging her response. The woman at the desk next to Maya, Daniel, didn't know her name. Mid-30s, always seemed to have an opinion, leaned over and said something quiet. Maya smiled tightly and put her headphones back on. Daniel returned to his screen. He told himself it was none of his business. By 10:30, he had walked by the marketing section 3 times, twice legitimately, once less so, and each time he'd clocked Maya working. Not browsing, not chatting. working with the focused intensity of someone who had learned that the only way to be undeniably right was to be undeniably thorough. At 11:04, he heard Mullins say, "These numbers are clean. Finally." He didn't hear Maya respond.
Joel.
They were in the break room at the same time at 12:15, which happened the way things sometimes happen, not planned, but not entirely accidental either. Daniel was heating up the pasta Lily had helped him make on Sunday, which was one of their rituals. Sunday cooking for Monday lunch, and he was watching the microwave when he heard the refrigerator open behind him, and then heard Maya say under her breath, "Who ate my yogurt?" He turned around. She was standing in front of the open refrigerator, holding a container of strawberry Greek yogurt with a small sticky note on it that read, "Maya's do not touch," and the container was clearly already opened. "That's brazen," Daniel said. Maya looked up. Her expression shifted just slightly when she registered it was him. Something that wasn't quite a smile, but was in the neighborhood. "Someone ate my lunch Tuesday too," she said. "Same person probably. Did you say something to building management?" "Oh sure, I'll submit a formal grievance about stolen yogurt. That'll really establish my credibility." "That's your food," he said. "You bought it, you labeled it. And someone who doesn't care about labels ate it anyway." She set the container down. "I'll just get something from the vending machine." "Take half of this," Daniel said without really deciding to say it. Maya looked at the pasta in his hands. "That's your lunch. There's too much of it. Lily and I always make too much." He moved to the small table and set down the container. "Sit down. You've been working since before most people showed up." "How do you know when I showed up?" "Your light was on when I got in." She looked at him for that long measuring moment again. He was starting to recognize it as something specific, not suspicion exactly, but the careful process of a woman who'd been burned enough times that kindness required verification. "I'm not trying to make you feel like you owe me anything," Daniel said. "It's pasta. Sit down." Maya sat down. For a minute they ate in silence, and it was the kind of silence that was actually comfortable, which surprised him. Daniel was not generally comfortable in silence with people he didn't know. But with Maya, the quiet felt less like something missing and more like something mutual. "Mullins is a problem," she said finally. "Yeah. He's been managing up and down the food chain for 20 years, and everyone thinks he's great because he's never the one who causes a scene. The scene always just happens near him." Daniel said nothing. He'd noticed the same thing. He'd chosen to operate around it rather than engage it. "I fixed that Everett account campaign by myself," Maya said with the careful control of someone who had rehearsed saying something true for so long they'd almost stopped believing it. "Stayed 3 consecutive weekends. Rebuilt the whole strategy from scratch. Do you know what Mullins said in the final presentation?" "What?" "The team really pulled together on this one." She said it in a flat, precise impression. "Really came through in the clutch." She stabbed at a piece of pasta with the fork he'd offered her. "I was the team. There was no one else in that room those weekends." "I know," Daniel said. She looked up. "How?" "Because I'm in project management. I see where the work comes from. I track resource allocation." "Then you know Mullins has been taking credit." "I know what I've observed," he said carefully. "I know what's in the system and what's in the presentations. Those are sometimes different documents." Maya stared at him. "And you've never said anything." It wasn't an accusation, but it wasn't not an accusation. "No," he said honestly. She looked back at her food. He let the discomfort sit there, rather than explaining it away, because he thought she deserved that much the truth without the excuse wrapped around it. "Why are you being nice to me?" she asked. "Not aggressive, just genuine." "Because you're a person," he said. "That shouldn't need a reason." "For most people it does." She was quiet for a moment. "I've worked here for 4 years. Before last night you'd never spoken to me." "I know." He held her gaze. "I'm sorry about that." She blinked, like she hadn't expected the apology and didn't entirely know what to do with it. People don't usually..." She stopped, tried again. "Most people say something like, well, we just never had the chance, or it's a big company. You just said sorry. Because it's true, he said. I noticed you before last night. I just didn't act on it. Noticed you. He heard it as he said it, and he saw her register the slight weight of those words, the way they could mean professional observation or something else entirely. She chose not to ask. Fair enough, she said. They finished the rest of the pasta. She offered to buy coffee from the cart downstairs, and he said yes, and when she came back with 2 cups, she set his down in front of him and said, "Black no sugar. You look like a black no sugar person." Is that a good thing? It means you've stopped lying to yourself about what you like. She sat back down with her own cup cream 2 sugars, and something about the way she said it made him think she wasn't just talking about coffee. Chatan. The week moved the way weeks do with its particular current of small urgencies and quiet moments. The kind of week that doesn't feel significant while you're in it, but which you'll remember later because something in it shifted. Daniel found himself aware of Maya in a way that was new and slightly uncomfortable. Not uncomfortable because it was wrong, but because it was unfamiliar. He'd gotten so good at not wanting things for himself that wanting had started to feel like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. He saw her at her desk when he walked past. He saw her in meetings twice in the same large room on opposite sides of the table, and once their eyes met across a diagram on the projector screen, and she gave him this look that said, "I know," and he looked away and said nothing, and she didn't either, but the moment was there. He heard about her from others, which he hadn't before. Or rather, he'd heard the things people said about her and had filed them away as office background noise. Now he listened differently. "Brooks is good," said Kieran from his team on Wednesday in the loose way people said things in the elevator. "I mean for someone in her position." "What's her position?" Daniel asked. Kieran seemed caught off guard. "I just mean, marketing specialist. Not like she's a director or anything." "She's better than most directors I've worked with," Daniel said. Kieran looked at him oddly, and the elevator reached the 3rd floor, and Daniel walked out. On Thursday, he passed the desk of the woman who sat next to Maya. Her name was Rachel. He'd looked it up, which he was slightly embarrassed about, and overheard Rachel saying to a colleague, "She acts like she came up with the whole thing herself. Like anyone would have hired her if she wasn't." She stopped when she noticed Daniel standing there. He looked at her. "If she wasn't what?" he said. Rachel smiled the way people smile when they've been caught doing something they'd defend to the death if pressed. "I was just saying she's been really confident lately." "She should be," Daniel said. "She's the best in the department." He walked back to his desk. He sat down and stared at his screen for a while. I thought about what he was doing. He was 38 years old. He had a daughter at home who still had nightmares. He had a mortgage and a project pipeline and a refrigerator that needed to be defrosted and zero emotional bandwidth for anything complicated. And yet, Maya Brooks had looked at him from a dark highway and asked him if he was flirting with her, and he'd said, "Does it have to be one or the other?" And he'd been proud of that answer in the moment, and now he wasn't sure what the answer actually was. He called Lily at 4 o'clock the way he always did. "How was school?" he asked. "Okay. We did a thing in art where you paint with your eyes closed." "How'd yours come out?" "Like a map of somewhere that doesn't exist." She paused. "Mrs. Peterson said it was interesting." "Mrs. Peterson's right." "Dad." "Yeah." "Did you have lunch today?" He smiled at his screen. "Yeah, I did." "With who?" "Someone from work." Silence. Then, "The lady from the highway." Daniel stopped. "How did you—" "You said she was real," Lily said simply. "That's better than nice. You were thinking about her." He was quiet for a moment. "You're 8, he said. 8.5. Right. Is she nice?" Lily asked. "She's—" He thought about it. The pasta, the yogurt, the way she'd said, "Does it have to be one or the other?" "Oh. She's real," he said. Lily laughed, a genuine bright sound that lived in his chest every time he heard it. "That's better than nice," she said. "You already told me." "I have to get back to work, Lil." "I know. Bye, Dad." "Bye, kid. Love you." "Love you too." He hung up and looked at his screen. The project file was open. The quarterly report was half finished. His inbox had 43 unread messages. He thought about Maya Brooks picking up papers off the asphalt alone in the dark, refusing to ask for help, refusing to be anything but standing. He thought about Emma, who had also refused to ask for help, and the gas station at 2 in the morning, and how he'd told her 100 times, "You can call me whenever, whatever. I'm always your first call," and she'd always smiled and said, "I know," and sometimes called and sometimes didn't, right up until the day she couldn't anymore. I thought about the shape of loneliness, which was not a dramatic thing most of the time. Most of the time it was just a break room at noon. Just the passenger seat of a car on a dark road. Just the space where a person was not. He opened the project file. He worked until 6. He went home. On Friday he found a sticky note on his desk when he came back from a meeting. It read, "The place is called Mended. I went. You were right, fair price. The bag saved." M underneath in smaller letters. "Thank you for the pasta. And the other thing." He read it twice. He put it in the top drawer of his desk, not in the trash. Then he went back to work. But he was smiling, and he didn't entirely know when he'd started. The sticky note stayed in Daniel's desk drawer for exactly 3 days before he did anything about it. I wasn't the kind of man who overthought small gestures. He'd built his entire professional reputation on reading situations, quickly deciding efficiently, and moving forward without second-guessing. But that small square of paper, with its 2 careful lines, "The bag saved. Thank you for the pasta." And the other thing sat in the back of his mind, the way a song sits in your head when you don't know all the words. Persistent. Unresolved. On Monday morning he got in early, the way he always did, made himself coffee at the break room machine, and walked past the marketing section without stopping. Maya was already at her desk. Headphones on screen up the particular focused stillness of someone who had already been working for an hour. He kept walking. He made it back to his desk, opened his project file, stared at it. Then he opened his bottom drawer, found a sticky note of his own, wrote 4 words on it, walked back across the floor, and placed it on the corner of her monitor without breaking his stride. He was back at his desk before she pulled off one headphone and read it. He didn't look up to see her reaction. But 15 minutes later, a new note appeared on his own monitor, and he had no idea how she'd placed it there without him noticing. His note had said, "Glad the bag survived." Her note said, "Glad you stopped." He put that one in the drawer too. By Wednesday, they had developed something that neither of them had named a rhythm of proximity that lived just outside the official boundaries of the workday. They weren't meeting for lunch. They were simply both ending up in the break room at the same time, approximately 12:15, which was slightly later than the noon rush, and slightly earlier than the 1 o'clock wave, and both of them clearly understood this without discussing it. "You look terrible," Maya said when he came in Wednesday, with the particular hollowed look of a man who had been up since 4. "Lily had a bad night," he said. She didn't ask him to explain. She just moved over on the bench, and he sat down beside her, and for a few minutes they ate in the companionable quiet of 2 people who had stopped needing to perform for each other. "She has nightmares," Maya asked eventually. "Sometimes, not as bad as they used to be." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "She was 5 when her mother died. For a while it was every night. Now it's maybe once a week." Maya was quiet. "What does she dream about?" "Losing people," he said. "Doors closing. Not being able to get to someone in time." He exhaled. "I sit with her until she falls back asleep. Sometimes that takes an hour." "And then you can't sleep." "And then I can't sleep." Maya looked at him steadily. There was something in her expression that wasn't sympathy, or not just sympathy. It was recognition. The look of someone who understood the specific exhaustion of being the person who held things together for so long that you'd forgotten there was supposed to be someone holding things together for you. "My mom raised me alone," she said. Not offered exactly, just placed on the table between them carefully. Different situation. But I know what it does to a kid watching a parent carry everything and pretend it doesn't weigh anything. Did it bother you watching her do that? It made me love her, Maya said. And it scared me. Because I learned to do the same thing, and I'm not sure that was the right lesson. Daniel looked at her. She was looking at her food, and he could see in her jaw the slight tightening that meant she'd said more than she intended. He didn't push. "Lily doesn't let me pretend," he said. "She sees through everything. 8 years old, and she already knows when I'm faking." Maya smiled genuinely this time, not the guarded professional version. Kids who've been through hard things always do. "She asked about you," he said. "I hadn't planned to say that. It just came out the way things came out when your guard was down and you'd been awake since 4. Maya's head came up. "About me." "I told her I gave someone a ride. She asked if you were nice." He paused. "I told her you were real, that it was better." Maya stared at him for a long moment. Something moved across her face, complex and quick there and then managed, and she looked back down at her food. "That's a very specific thing to remember telling your daughter about a stranger," she said. "You're not a stranger," he said. "Not anymore." The break room was empty except for them. The fluorescent lights hummed their constant indifferent hum. Down the hall. Someone's phone rang twice and stopped. "Daniel," Maya said in a voice that was careful and real and slightly tired. "I need to tell you something." "Okay. I'm not good at this." She gestured vaguely between them. "Whatever this is. I've been down a roads before where a man was very kind to me, and then at some point the kindness became about something else. His loneliness. His need to feel like he saved someone." She paused. "I'm not accusing you of that. I just want to be clear that I see that pattern, and I won't walk into it again." "That's fair," he said. "You're not going to argue." "Why would I argue? You told me something true about yourself. Arguing would mean I'm already doing the thing you described." She looked at him. Again that expression, the careful calculation of someone trying to determine if the ground was solid before putting her full weight on it. "You're very disarming," she said. "It's slightly inconvenient. I'll work on being more alarming." And she laughed. Not the short, controlled sound from the first night, but something real that escaped before she could catch it. And for just a second, she looked startled by herself, and then she laughed again and shook her head and finished her lunch. He walked back to his desk, feeling like something had come slightly loose in his chest. Not painfully. Just the way a window comes loose in a warm spring, the seal giving the air coming through. He told himself that was fine. He told himself he wasn't going to make it into something it wasn't. He pulled up his project file, answered 6 emails, attended a 2 o'clock with the director, and didn't think about Maya Brooks again until 7 minutes into the meeting, when Frank Mullins said with the specific satisfaction of a man presenting someone else's work as his own general oversight. "The Callaway campaign figures I put together last quarter were the baseline for everything we're building now." Daniel looked at his notepad. Because Daniel had the resource allocation files. He had the time logs. And he knew with the clean certainty of a man who tracked where work actually came from, that Frank Mullins had not touched the Callaway campaign after the initial brief. Maya Brooks had rebuilt it from the foundation up, working 3 consecutive weekends, and the reason the current quarter's baseline was solid was because of her. He didn't say anything in that meeting. I went back to his desk and pulled up the project files and sat with what he knew and what he hadn't done with it. Then Thursday happened. Thursday changed everything. The Meridian presentation had been on the calendar for 6 weeks. It was the kind of meeting that determined whether the company renewed a contract worth $11 million, the kind of meeting that directors spent a month preparing for and then stood in front of like they'd conjured it from air. Daniel's team was handling the logistics data. Marketing was handling the strategy deck. He knew Maya had been working on the strategy. He'd seen the late lights. He'd seen the dark circles that even her carefully maintained composure couldn't quite hide. He'd heard through the particular membrane of office awareness that she had rebuilt the pitch 4 times, scrapped a framework that 3 other people had signed off on, and replaced it with something that her manager, a mid-level director named Terrence, who was decent enough but conflict-averse to his core, had described privately as bold, which in their company's vocabulary meant impressive, but potentially someone else's problem if it fails. The meeting was in the top-floor conference room at 2 o'clock. 12 people around the table. The Meridian executives at one end. Frank Mullins at the head, because Frank Mullins was always at the head. Daniel in the middle with his logistics team. Maya near the projector, her laptop open, her face a controlled and professional mask. It started well. The numbers Daniel's team presented were clean and precise. The Meridian side nodded, asked questions, got answers. Standard operating procedure for the first 30 minutes. Then it was Maya's turn. She stood up and connected her laptop and pulled up the strategy deck. And what happened in the next 25 minutes was the clearest demonstration Daniel had ever seen of the gap between talent and credit. Because the strategy Maya had built was not just good. It was the kind of good that makes a room go quiet, in the way rooms go quiet when something surprises them. She had reconstructed the entire value proposition, repositioned the company's offering against 3 competitors, and built a retention model that projected an 18% improvement in client longevity backed by data. She had pulled, cleaned, and analyzed herself. The Meridian executives leaned forward. Frank Mullins smiled the smile of a man about to receive something he hadn't earned. Maya presented for 25 minutes without a single hesitation, without a single stumble, without once looking at her notes. She knew every number, anticipated every question, and answered 2 before they were fully asked. She was in every measurable sense the most prepared person in that room. When she finished, there was a beat of silence, and then the lead Meridian executive, a sharp woman named Carol Vance, who had the eyes of someone who had been lied to by consultants for 30 years and had developed an allergy to it, said, "This is the most coherent long-term strategy we've seen from any vendor this cycle. Who built this?" Frank Mullins opened his mouth. "Maya Brooks did," Daniel said. The room turned, every head including Maya's. Frank Mullins's mouth was still open. He closed it, opened it again. "Well, the team, Maya built this independently," Daniel said. His voice was level, not aggressive, not loud, just the voice of a man stating a fact that was in the files and the time logs and the system, and therefore was not debatable. "I can show you the development timeline if it's useful. The framework revision, the competitive positioning, the retention model, all of it originated with her. I have the version history if anyone needs it." Carol Vance looked at Maya. Maya had gone very still. Not the controlled stillness of her professional mask. Something different. The stillness of someone who had just felt the floor move under them in a direction they hadn't anticipated. "Is that accurate?" Carol Vance asked her. "Yes," Maya said. Her voice was steady. Everything about her was steady because she was the kind of woman who had learned to hold herself together in public, regardless of what was happening inside. "I can walk you through any section in more detail." "I'd like that," Carol Vance said. And she wasn't talking about the deck anymore. Frank Mullins said nothing for the rest of the meeting. Daniel kept his eyes on his notepad and answered the 2 logistics questions that came his way, and did not look at Mullins, because looking at Mullins would have made it confrontational, and Daniel didn't want confrontation. He wanted accuracy. He wanted credit to go where credit was due, which was a principle. So basic it shouldn't have required courage. But in the architecture of this particular office, in this particular company, apparently, it did. The meeting ended at 4:15. Carol Vance shook Maya's hand specifically by name before she shook anyone else's. That was a message, and everyone in the room understood it. People filed out. Daniel gathered his notes. He was almost to the door when Frank Mullins's hand came down on his arm. "A word," Mullins said. "Quiet. Controlled. The voice of a man who was angry and had enough experience to know not to show it in front of witnesses." The room emptied. Daniel waited. "What was that?" Mullins said. "I answered a direct question," Daniel said. Carol Vance asked who built the strategy. Maya Brooks built it. "We function as a team here, Carter. That's how this company..." "Frank." Daniel kept his voice even. "I'm not in your department. I don't report to you, and I have 5 years of project data that would make a very interesting audit if anyone ever wanted to look at who was actually producing what in this building." He paused. "I'm not looking for a fight. I'm not going to HR. I'm telling you as a colleague that what happened in there today needed to happen. Leave it there." Mullins stared at him. "She's just going to expect this now," Mullins said finally, with the particular bitterness of a man who had mistaken silence for agreement his entire career. "You know that, right? You just made everything harder." For who? Daniel asked. Mullins had no answer for that. He picked up his binder and left. Daniel stood in the empty conference room for a moment. His heart was beating harder than he'd let on. He wasn't naturally a man who made scenes, and what he'd done, while not technically a scene, had crossed a line he'd spent 5 years not crossing. He wasn't sure if he'd done it for the right reasons. He wasn't sure his reasons were entirely clean. I thought about Maya saying, "I've been down roads where a man was kind to me," and at some point, the kindness became about his need to feel like he saved someone. He sat with that. He found her in the hallway outside the elevators 20 minutes later. Everyone else had gone back to their desks. She was standing at the window at the end of the corridor, her arms crossed, looking out at the parking lot below, and she didn't turn around when she heard his footsteps, which meant she'd recognize them. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. Mullins is going to make your life difficult." "Probably. That was your career you just put in the middle of a conflict that has nothing to do with you." "It has something to do with me," he said. "I've watched it happen for 2 years and said nothing. That's not nothing, that's a choice." She turned around. Her eyes were bright, and he could tell she was angry, but it was the kind of anger that lives right next to something else, the kind that has tears underneath it. Not from weakness, but from years of being a person who does not permit herself to cry in office hallways. "Why?" she said. "And don't say because it was right. I need to know why you specifically today in that room." He thought about it seriously the way she deserved. "Because Carol Vance asked a direct question," he said, "and the answer was, you, and I was the only person in that room who was going to say it." He paused. "That's the part I'm not proud of, that I was the only one." Maya looked at him for a long time. "I don't need protecting," she said. The same words from the first night, but the texture was different now. Less armor, more clarity. "I know that," he said. "What happened in there wasn't protection. You'd already done everything. You stood in front of 12 people, and you were the best one in the room by a mile. All I did was make sure the right name got attached to the right work. And if it costs you, then it costs me." She shook her head slightly. Not dismissal. Something else. The gesture of a woman encountering something she doesn't have a ready category for. "People don't do that," she said quietly. "Some people do." "Not for me," she said. "Not without wanting something." He held her gaze. "I'm not going to tell you I don't want anything. That would be a lie." He said it carefully without flinching. "But what I want doesn't have anything to do with what happened today. Those are separate things." Maya was very still. "What do you want?" she asked. The question was direct and real, and slightly terrifying in the way that honest questions always are. "Lunch tomorrow," he said. "Real lunch, not the break room. There's a place 2 blocks from here called Harlow's. Do you know it?" She blinked. Whatever she'd been expecting, it wasn't that. "The sandwich place. It has tables outside. It's supposed to be decent weather." "You're asking me to lunch?" "I'm asking you to lunch," he confirmed. "After what just happened in that meeting. Especially after what happened in that meeting. You just saved this company $11 million. You should eat somewhere with actual sunlight." Maya stared at him. Then she looked away. He could see her working through it, all the ways this could be what she'd described. All the patterns she'd learned, to recognize all the walls that were there for good reasons. And he didn't try to take them down. He stood there and let her think. "Noon?" she asked finally. "Noon," he said. She looked back at him, and there it was again. That millimeter of something releasing the smallest increment of a door that had been locked for a very long time. "If you try to pay for my lunch," she said, "I'm leaving." "Split it," he said immediately. "Fine. Fine." She walked toward the elevator, and he walked toward the stairs, and neither of them said anything else, and his heart was doing something inconvenient, and he was 38 years old, and he had a mortgage and a daughter with nightmares, and more responsibility than bandwidth. And none of that was the thing he was thinking about when he pushed open the stairwell door. I was thinking about a woman who stood up in front of 12 people and didn't look at her notes once. He was thinking about sticky notes and fair price repair shops and strawberry Greek yogurt with a label someone ignored. He was thinking about doors that had been closed for a long time and the particular sound they make when something finally shifts. I was thinking that wanting things for himself felt like a language he'd almost forgotten, and somebody had just said one word of it out loud, and his body had remembered immediately, and that was equal parts wonderful and absolutely terrifying. His phone buzzed on the stairs. He looked at it. Lily. Dad, did you eat today? He typed back. Yes. Lily. With the real lady. He stopped walking. He typed. Go do your homework. Lily. That means yes. LOL. He put his phone in his pocket and kept walking, and he was smiling in the stairwell where nobody could see him. And it felt like something that had been very cold for a very long time was just beginning to remember what warmth felt like. Not on fire, not dramatic, just warmth, the quiet kind, the kind that stays. I didn't know yet what Maya was deciding on the elevator. He didn't know she had her back against the elevator wall and her eyes closed and was doing the thing she always did when something scared her. Breathing slowly, cataloging risks, building the logical case for why this was probably fine or probably not, or probably something she couldn't afford. I didn't know that she pulled out her phone and almost texted her friend Danielle, and then didn't because she didn't want to explain it out loud yet and make it real in that direction. He didn't know that she stood in the elevator after it reached the third-floor doors open and just stayed there for 10 full seconds before she stepped out. He didn't know any of that. But the next day at noon, Harlow's had a table in the sun, and they both showed up at the same time from opposite directions, and she got there first, and he saw her standing at the entrance, looking at her phone, and for a split second before she noticed him, he saw her face with the mask entirely off, a little nervous, a little hopeful, a little angry at herself for being either. And then she looked up, and the mask came back professional and amused and dry, and she said, "You're 30 seconds late." "Traffic," he said. "You walked 2 blocks. Complicated 2 blocks." She almost smiled. "Buy your own lunch," she said. "Already planning to," he said. And they went inside. Harlow's became a habit the way good things sometimes do not, with announcement, not with decision, but with repetition. That one day you realize you've been counting on. The first lunch was careful. They talked about work, about the Meridian contract, about Carol Vance's follow-up email that had landed in the director's inbox the next morning, specifically praising the strategic presentation. Maya had showed him the email without comment, slid her phone across the table, watched him read it. He'd handed it back and said, "How does that feel?" And she'd been quiet for a moment and said, "Like something I've been waiting 3 years to have in writing." He hadn't said anything else. He understood that some victories needed space, not commentary. The second lunch was easier. She told him about growing up in Cleveland, her mother working double shifts at a hospital laundry. The particular texture of being the kid who wore last season's clothes and learned early that the only currency she could reliably generate was being undeniably good at things. He told her about his father, a contractor in Pennsylvania, who communicated primarily through action and never said anything directly emotional in his life, and how Daniel had spent most of his 20s learning to unlearn that, and then Emma died, and he had to learn it all over again in a completely different way. "You said her name," Maya said. "Emma." "Yeah. You didn't the other times." "I know." She looked at him steadily. "Is that hard?" "It used to be harder," he said. "Now it's just true. She was real. She had a name. Pretending she didn't exist doesn't help Lily, and it doesn't help me." Maya nodded slowly. "What was she like?" I thought about it honestly, not the edited version, not the grief-smoothed memory. "Stubborn," he said. "Brilliant. Bad at asking for help." He paused. "She would have argued with you constantly and respected you completely. You have the same energy." Maya's expression shifted. "That's an interesting thing to say." "It's a true thing to say. It could be taken wrong." "I know," he said. "I didn't mean it wrong." She looked at him for a long moment, the way she always did. The measurement that he'd come to understand was not suspicion, but self-protection. The careful instinct of a woman who had learned that the space between intent and impact was where she always got hurt. "I'm not a replacement," she said, quietly, without accusation. "I know that," he said. "You're not anything except exactly what you are, which is more than enough." She picked up her sandwich and took a bite and looked away, and he could see in the line of her shoulders that something had landed, and he let it land without following up, without softening it, without taking it back. By the fourth week, they weren't discussing whether to have lunch. They were discussing where. Maya had opinions about where. She'd lived in this city for 9 years and had a mental map of every decent place to eat within a half-mile radius, ranked by quality to price ratio, and cross-referenced by how loud it was because she couldn't think in loud spaces. He discovered this and filed it away without comment. The way you file away important information about a person you're paying attention to. He also discovered she drank her coffee wrong by her own admission. Too much cream, which she claimed canceled the bitterness, but Daniel pointed out probably also canceled the coffee. She kept a small notebook in her left desk drawer filled with ideas she never showed anyone. She corrected people's grammar internally, but almost never out loud, except once, when their mid-level director Terrence used literally so incorrectly in a meeting that she said, "Do you mean figuratively?" and then looked immediately like she regretted it. She was incapable of walking past a dog without acknowledging it. And she had an entire complicated relationship with her ambition. She was prouder of her work than almost anyone he'd met, and simultaneously more afraid of being seen as too much. He discovered this last thing on a Wednesday, 5 weeks after Harlow's, when she came back from a meeting with the company VP, looking like she'd been hit by something she hadn't seen coming. He was at his desk. She walked past him and kept going straight to the break room, which was where she went when she needed a minute. He gave her 4 minutes and then followed. She was standing at the counter not making coffee, just standing there with both hands flat on the surface and her head down. "What happened?" he said. "They want me to lead the new Vantage division," she said. He waited. "That's good," she said in a voice that did not sound like she thought it was good. "That's a director-level position. It's what I've been working toward for 3 years." "But," he said. She looked up. "Terrence told me privately right after the offer that some people on the executive team had concerns, that they worried I might be, and I'm using his word, too aggressive in the client presentation style." She paused. "Carol Vance specifically requested me. The executive team apparently needed convincing." "Too aggressive," Daniel repeated. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't interrupt anyone. I presented a strategy that saved an $11 million contract and backed every single claim with data. I know. A man who did exactly what I did would be described as decisive," she said. The flatness in her voice was controlled fury, the kind she'd built years of practice containing. "I get aggressive." He didn't argue with her because arguing would have meant suggesting she was wrong, and she wasn't wrong. "Are you going to take the position?" he said. She looked at him. "Yes," she said immediately. "Obviously, yes. I'm not going to let someone else's discomfort with me cost me what I've earned." She paused. "I just needed 30 seconds to be angry about it." "Take 60, he said. "It deserves 60. Something cracked in her expression. Not broke, cracked like a small fracture that let a little light out, and she laughed once hard and shook her head. "You are so strange," she said. "So I've been told." "I mean that as a compliment." "I know you do." She straightened up. "I'm accepting the position. I'm going to build something with that division that nobody can dismiss or diminish or call aggressive. And in 3 years, it'll be the best performing team in this building." "I believe that," he said. "You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it because I have to." He met her eyes. "I'm saying it because I've watched you work for 6 weeks, and I've never seen anyone more prepared or more thorough or more capable of walking into a room and owning it completely. You'll build something great because that's what you do with everything you touch." The break room was quiet. Maya looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen from her before. Unguarded fully, without the microsecond of processing that usually preceded her responses. Just her face open for 1 full second. Then it closed again gently. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." "You're welcome." "Now stop looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you're I don't know, like that." She moved toward the door. "I have an acceptance email to write." "Use decisive in the subject line," he said. She stopped in the doorway. "That's actually not bad." "I have my moments." she left. He stood in the break room for a moment and then went back to his desk and thought about the look on her face for approximately 4 minutes before he was able to concentrate on anything else. That evening, Lily asked him why he was smiling at dinner. "I'm not smiling," he said. "You've been smiling since you got home," Lily said with the precision of a child who had made a study of her father's face. "It's the same smile you get when something goes the way you hoped. Eat your food." "Is it about the real lady?" "Lily. I'm just asking." "I know you're just asking." "So is it?" He put down his fork. "Her name is Maya," he said. "She got good news at work today." Lily considered this. "Do you like her?" "She's a friend," he said. And even as he said it, he heard how incomplete it was, like describing the sky as a ceiling. Lily looked at him with Emma's eyes. She had Emma's eyes, the exact same particular shade of brown, with the green ring around the iris, and she said, "Dad, it's okay if you like her." He looked at his daughter. "I know it's okay," he said. "You act like it's not," she said simply. "You act like something's wrong with it." "Nothing's wrong with it," he said. "Okay," Lily said, and went back to her food with the completeness of someone who had made her point and was done. He sat at that kitchen table for a long time after she went to bed. He sat with what he was afraid of, which he hadn't put into words before, because putting things into words made them real and made them something that could be taken away. He was afraid of wanting something and losing it. He was afraid of bringing someone into Lily's life who might become important to her and then be gone. He was afraid of the look on his daughter's face if he got this wrong. He was afraid of his own heart, which had gone very quiet after Emma, and which was now unmistakably making noise again in a way that was inconvenient and alarming and impossible to reason with. He was afraid that Maya was right about the pattern, that what he felt was the need to protect something, rather than the desire to know someone. He sat with that the longest. And then around 10 o'clock, his phone buzzed. "Maya question. Daniel, go ahead. Maya, this Saturday. There's a farmer's market on Clement 2 blocks from my apartment. I go every week. Do you want to come?" He read it 3 times. Not because it was complicated, but because he wanted to read it correctly. Because she hadn't asked it as a date. She hadn't framed it as anything. She'd said, "I go every week and do you want to come?" Which meant, "This is my life. This is what I do. Do you want to be in it?" No performance. No occasion. Just an open door. "Daniel." "What time?" "Maya 9. Don't be 30 seconds late." "Daniel." "No promises." "Maya." "Bring the kid if you want." He stared at that line. "Bring the kid if you want." She had said it casually as an afterthought, as if it were the simplest thing in the world, and maybe that was exactly what made it not simple at all. Because Maya Brooks, who had spent 5 weeks letting him in exactly 1 careful inch at a time, had just voluntarily opened a door to the most important part of his life. He set down his phone. He went upstairs. He stood outside Lily's room and listened to her breathe in the way he'd done every night since she was born. This habit of reassurance that had never stopped being necessary, and then he knocked softly and opened the door. "Lil," he said quietly. "I'm awake," she said immediately, which meant she hadn't been asleep at all. He sat on the edge of her bed. "Saturday morning. Farmer's market on Clement. Do you want to go?" Lily was very still. "With Maya," she said. "If you want," he said. "If you don't want, we'll go alone." She suggested it, but it's your call. Lily thought about this with the full gravity she brought to things that mattered. Is she going to be weird about me? What does that mean? Some of the moms at school, when their dads have girlfriends, the women are weird to the kids, like they're trying too hard, or they're annoyed, or they're pretending. "Maya doesn't pretend," he said. "How do you know?" "Because she's the worst liar I've ever met," he said. "Everything she thinks is on her face." Lily seemed to accept this. "Okay," she said. "Saturday." "Saturday," he confirmed. He kissed her forehead and went to the door, and she said, "Dad." "Yeah." "If she's as real as you say, I'll know." "I know you said." "Good," she said. "I have good instincts." "You have excellent instincts." "I know," she said without arrogance, just certainty. Good night. Good night, kid. I went to his room and lay in the dark for a while, and then picked up his phone. Daniel. She wants to come. Both of us. There was a pause, longer than her usual response time. Maya. Okay. Daniel. You sure you're ready for an 8-year-old with opinions? Maya, I grew up as an 8-year-old with opinions. I have some experience. Daniel, fair warning. She'll figure you out faster than you expect. Maya, good. I'd rather be seen than performed for. He read that line twice. I'd rather be seen than performed for. He thought about how long it had taken him to understand that sentence, and how she'd just produced it in a text message at 10:15 on a Thursday night like it was self-evident. Daniel Saturday at 9. Maya Saturday at 9. He put his phone down. He fell asleep faster than he had in weeks. Saturday arrived with the particular quality of a day that doesn't know. It's important. Blue sky, a mild temperature. The farmer's market set up its rows of tables and tents, without any awareness that anything significant was happening among its customers. They found Maya at the corner of Clement and 4th at 8:58. She was wearing a yellow dress and carrying a canvas tote and eating a piece of fruit she'd clearly just bought. And she looked. Daniel registered this before he could stop himself, like someone who existed completely in her own life, fully without apology. The way some people do when they're entirely themselves in a space. She saw them from half a block away, and he watched her face do something quick and complicated, nerves probably. Though she'd kill him for saying so. And then she straightened and smiled, and the smile was real. Hi, she said. Hi, Daniel said. Then they both looked at Lily. Lily looked at Maya with Emma's eyes with that serious 8.5-year-old assessment and said, Your dress is yellow. It is, Maya said without condescension, matching the gravity. I like yellow, Lily said. Me too, Maya said. Best color for a Saturday. Lily considered this and appeared to accept it. She looked up at her father. She's okay, she said simply. Daniel looked at Maya, who was pressing her lips together in a way that meant she was trying very hard not to laugh. High praise, Maya said. Lily's a tough room, Daniel said. I'll take it, Maya said, and held out the canvas tote. Do you want to carry this? You seem like someone who takes the job seriously. Lily took the tote with both hands and looked into it. What are we getting? Tomatoes, bread, whatever looks good. You're in charge of the vegetables. I don't like all vegetables. Which ones do you like? Corn, sometimes carrots if they're not mushy. Mushy carrots are a crime, Maya said. We'll find the good ones. And Lily took the tote and walked ahead toward the first table, and Daniel watched his daughter go, and then looked at Maya, and she was already looking at him, and neither of them said anything, because there wasn't anything to say that the moment wasn't already saying. They moved through the market at Lily's pace, which was thorough and somewhat chaotic. She cross-examined a farmer about whether his tomatoes were actually good or just the best available option. She tried 3 samples of jam before selecting the one she wanted. She found a man selling handmade wooden toys and spent 7 minutes examining each one. Maya kept up with her without effort, without the performed enthusiasm Daniel had watched other adults offer his daughter the slightly too bright interest that Lily always clocked immediately and rejected. Maya was just present. She answered questions directly. She didn't talk down. When Lily said something incorrect about how corn grew, Maya said, Actually, that's not quite right, and explained it plainly, and Lily looked annoyed for 2 seconds, and then said, Okay, and moved on, and Daniel thought, there it is. At the bread table, while Lily was absorbed in smelling every loaf with the intensity of a professional, Maya stepped up beside Daniel and said quietly, She looks like you. She looks like her mother, he said. She has your jaw, Maya said. And your thing. What thing? The way she looks at something before she decides. Very still, very complete. Like she's not going to commit until she has everything she needs. He looked at her. You noticed that in 10 minutes. I told you, I pay attention too. She paused. She's remarkable, Daniel. He heard the way she said his name. She didn't use it often, and when she did, it carried weight landed differently. He filed it away. "She is," he said. "She's going to be formidable," Maya said. "Like I feel slightly intimidated, and she's 8. 8.5, he said. Maya laughed, and Lily turned around at the sound of it holding a loaf of sourdough and looked between them with those observant eyes, and Daniel waited for her verdict. Lily said, "Can we get the big one? It smells like Sunday." "What does Sunday smell like?" Maya asked. Lily thought about it seriously. "Slow," she said. "Like nothing is rushing." Maya looked at her for a moment. Then she reached into the tote and paid for the big loaf without checking the price first. Daniel noticed. He filed that away too. They were walking back toward Clement Street with the full tote when Lily reached up and took Maya's hand. Not Daniel's. Maya's. Just took it the way children take things they want directly without strategy because they decided they wanted it and didn't see any reason not to. Maya looked down at their joined hands and then up at Daniel with an expression he hadn't seen from her yet, open and undone, and trying very hard not to show it, and he looked back at her steadily, and she looked away first. Lily swung their arms once, then said, "You can come to Sunday breakfast if you want. Dad makes good eggs." "Does he?" Maya said. "He has a thing he does with butter," Lily said. "It's not just eggs, it's a whole method." "A whole method," Maya repeated, glancing at Daniel with something amused and warm. "It's just eggs," Daniel said. "He's being modest," Lily said. "He's modest about everything." "I've noticed that," Maya said. "It's a little bit annoying," Lily said. "I've noticed that too." Daniel looked at these two people, one very small and one not walking on either side of him on a Saturday morning on Clement Street. The canvas tote between them, the bread that smelled like Sunday, and he felt something so specific he had no name for it. Not happiness exactly, though it was that. Not relief, though it was that too. Something more like recognition, like a door he'd forgotten was there opening from the inside. He didn't say any of this. He said, "The eggs are going to get a lot less impressive if you keep building them up." "They won't," Lily said. "They're legitimately great eggs." "I'll be the judge," Maya said, and the three of them walked up Clement Street in the Saturday morning quiet, and Daniel thought, this is what it looks like. This right here. Not a grand gesture, not a declaration, not a rescue. Just a Tuesday that becomes a Wednesday, a break room that becomes a habit, a farmer's market that becomes a morning that becomes the kind of thing you start to build a life around without meaning to, without planning, without knowing it's happening until it already has. That afternoon after, Maya had eaten the eggs and confirmed Lily's assessment and argued with Daniel about whether the butter ratio mattered as much as the heat setting it did. Maya said, "The butter ratio is everything." Daniel said, "Temperature is primary." Lily said they were both right, which was diplomatically masterful. They stood at the door when Maya was leaving the three of them in the familiar geometry of a moment that meant something. Maya crouched down to Lily's level, which very few adults did, and said, "Thank you for letting me come." Lily looked at her. "You can come back," she said. Yeah. A pause. "But you have to be on time. Dad's always on time." "I'm always on time," Maya said. "Dad said you're not." Maya stood up and looked at Daniel. "You told your 8-year-old I was late." "She asked," he said. "I was 30 seconds late once." "She mentioned that," Lily said helpfully. Maya shook her head, and her eyes were bright, and she said to Lily, "I'll be on time." And then she looked at Daniel with that expression, the one he was learning, the one underneath the dry humor and the controlled precision, the open one, the true one, and said, "This was a good morning." "It was," he said. "The eggs were good," she said. "Temperature," he said. "Butter ratio," she said. "Both," Lily said from behind them. Maya laughed, and it was the best sound in the apartment, and she went down the steps, and he stood in the doorway, watching her go, and Lily came to stand beside him, and they both watched until she turned the corner. Then Lily said, "Dad." "Yeah." "She cried a little when I took her hand. I felt her hand shake." Daniel was very still. She didn't think I could tell, Lily said. But I could. He looked down at his daughter. She's been alone for a long time, Lily said with the certainty of someone who recognized the shape of that particular loneliness. Like you. He didn't answer for a moment. Yeah, he said finally. Like me. Lily leaned against his arm. That's okay, she said. We have enough space. He put his hand on top of her head. He thought about Maya turning the corner. He thought about a woman who had stood on a dark highway with a broken bag and asked a stranger if he was flirting with her, and all of the roads, literal and otherwise, that ran between that moment and this one. He thought, I stopped seeing you as someone I needed to help. I started seeing you as someone I wanted beside me. He hadn't said that out loud yet, but standing in that doorway with his daughter leaning against his arm, he thought it was possibly the truest thing he knew. The Sunday after the farmer's market, Maya came for breakfast. She was on time. Exactly on time. The kind of on time that meant she had been slightly early and waited around the corner for 2 minutes before ringing the bell, which Daniel suspected but didn't say. She brought coffee from the cart 3 blocks over black for him, cream, and 2 sugars for herself, and a hot chocolate with exactly 1 marshmallow for Lily, which she had somehow known to get without asking, and which Lily accepted with the solemnity of someone receiving something they'd hoped for but hadn't dared request. Lily looked at the single marshmallow floating in the cup and said, "How did you know I don't like a lot of marshmallows?" "Because you seem like a quality over quantity person," Maya said. Lily looked at her father. "I like her," she said, as if Daniel had asked, and she was delivering her official verdict. "I gathered," Daniel said. "She can stay for breakfast," Lily said, and walked back to the living room with her hot chocolate and her dignity fully intact. And Maya stood in the doorway, looking like someone who had just passed a test she hadn't known she was taking. "Quality over quantity," Daniel said. "It was a guess," Maya said. "A correct one. I'm good at reading people." She stepped inside. "You, for instance, you've been up since 6:15. You made the eggs already, didn't you? And then unmade them because you didn't know when I'd get here." He looked at her. "The pan's still warm," she said simply. "I can smell the butter." He turned back to the stove. "Butter ratio," he said. "Obviously," she said. She sat at the kitchen table, the same chair she'd taken the only other time she'd been in this kitchen, which meant it was already her chair, which was the kind of thing that happened quietly and without negotiation, and she talked to him while he cooked, easy and unhurried. And it was the most ordinary morning he'd had in years, which was the reason it felt extraordinary. Lily came back for eggs, and they ate together, the 3 of them, at a table that had been a table for 2 for 3 years, and the extra chair had been there the whole time, pushed slightly back, slightly apart, and now it wasn't. After breakfast, Lily showed Maya her art project, the painting of the map that went nowhere, which she'd framed and hung on her bedroom wall, and Maya stood in front of it for a full 30 seconds without saying anything, and then said, "This is the most honest painting I've ever seen." Lily stood beside her. "My teacher said it was interesting." "Your teacher was being polite," Maya said. "What you made here is something different. You painted a place that exists only for you." Lily was very still. "Yeah," she said softly. "That's what it is." Daniel watched from the doorway. He thought about all the ways love reveals itself in the specific and small, in the 1 marshmallow, and the 30 seconds in front of a painting, and the chair that becomes a chair, and how none of it is visible unless you're paying attention, and how paying attention was the only thing that had ever mattered. The weeks that followed moved with the particular momentum of things that are both inevitable and fragile, moving fast enough to be real, but carefully enough that nobody broke anything. Maya came on Sundays, sometimes Saturdays. She and Lily developed their own language, their own jokes, their own system of communication that didn't require Daniel as translator, and he watched it happen from the edges with something that was pride and gratitude and a kind of awe he hadn't expected. She never tried to be a mother. She never positioned herself between Lily and Emma's memory. When Lily mentioned her mom, which she did naturally, the way kids mention the truth, Maya listened without flinching and without redirecting, and once she said simply, "She sounds like she was someone worth missing." And Lily had looked at her for a long moment and said, "Yeah," and that had been enough. At work, everything was shifting. Maya had accepted the Vantage Division directorship and immediately began the work of building something from the bones of a department that had been underfunded and undertreated for years. Daniel watched the transformation from across the floor, watched her recruit 2 people nobody else had looked at, twice watched her restructure the workflow, watched her take meetings with clients who had written off the division and come out with signed contracts. Mullins watched too, and what Mullins watched made him dangerous. Daniel noticed it on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after the Meridian meeting, when he arrived early and found Frank Mullins in the director's office, with the door partially open and the conversation not as private as Mullins seemed to believe. "I'm not saying she isn't capable," Mullins was saying. "I'm saying the manner in which she operates creates a certain friction with the broader team." The director, a decent man named Howard Briggs, who had the weakness of all decent men who'd been comfortable too long, said, "The Vantage numbers are very strong, Frank." "Early days," Mullins said. "And frankly, Howard, the way the Meridian situation was handled reflected poorly on our team culture. When individual contributors start making attribution claims in front of clients." Daniel kept walking. He went to his desk. He sat down and looked at his screen. I thought about going back to that office. He thought about what he could say, and what it would cost, and what Maya would think if she knew he'd heard that conversation, and decided to act on it again. He thought about what she'd said at the window the day of the Meridian meeting. "I don't need protecting." He thought about the difference between protecting and witnessing. He picked up his phone. Daniel Mullins is in Briggs's office, has been for 20 minutes, talking about team culture and the Meridian situation. He stared at the message for 10 seconds and then sent it. Maya's response came 4 minutes later. "Maya, I know." He read that and felt something cold move through him. "Daniel, you knew he was going in there today, Maya. I knew it was coming. Terrence warned me last week. Mullins has been building a case for 2 months. Daniel, why didn't you tell me?" "Maya, because it's not your fight." He stared at his screen. The fluorescent lights hummed. Down the hall, someone's phone rang twice and stopped. Daniel, Maya. "Maya, I have a meeting in 10. We'll talk at lunch." He put his phone and worked for 2 hours with half his attention and spent the other half thinking about everything she wasn't telling him and why. At lunch, she ordered first, which she always did now, and she sat down across from him and said before he could speak, "Don't make that face." "What face?" "The one where you're about to say something protective." "I was going to say, you were going to say something about Mullins and what you should do and how you could help, and I need you to listen to me first." She put her hands flat on the table, a gesture he recognized, the same gesture she'd used at the counter in the break room the day she got the Vantage offer. "I've handled Mullins before. I'll handle him again. What I need from you is not intervention." "What do you need from me?" She looked at him. "To not do something that puts your job at risk on my behalf," she said. "You have a daughter, Daniel. You have a mortgage. You can't keep stepping in front of things for me." "I stepped in front of one thing," he said. "Once. In a meeting. And it meant something. It did." She held his gaze. "And it also changed how Mullins sees you. I know it did. I need you to understand that I'm aware of what it cost, and I don't want it to cost you anything else." I was quiet. "You're not responsible for me," she said. "Whatever this is between us, whatever it's becoming, I need it to not be built on you protecting me. I need to fight my own fights." "I know that," he said. "Do you?" "Yes." He held her gaze. "But there's a difference between fighting for you and fighting alongside you. I'm not interested in the first one. The second one is something else." Maya looked at him for a long moment. "What does that mean?" "It means if you tell me what's happening, I can be informed without intervening. It means if you need someone to think through strategy with, I'm here for that. It means—" He stopped. Tried again. "It means I'm not going anywhere, and if something is threatening your position, I'd rather know about it as someone who's in your corner than find out about it after the fact as a bystander." The restaurant was loud around them. Someone laughed 2 tables over. A server called out an order. Maya said, "That's a very careful way of saying you want to be more than a friend." "It's a very careful way of saying exactly what I said." "Daniel." "Maya." She looked at the table, back at him. "I'm scared of this," she said. Simply without performance, the flattest, most honest statement she'd made to him. "I know," he said. "So am I." "You don't act scared." "I'm terrified," he said. "I have been since the highway. I'm also a project manager. I've learned to function scared." She almost laughed. "That's either reassuring or alarming." "Probably both," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "Mullins is going to try to undermine the Vantage Division's Q3 numbers," she said. "He has access to the resource allocation reports through Howard, and he's been framing my team's support costs as inefficiencies." "He's reclassifying overhead," Daniel said immediately. "Yes. That's in my system. Project management tracks all resource allocations cross-departmentally." "I know," she said, "which means I have the accurate numbers." "Yes," she said. "You do." He looked at her. "You knew that before you sat down." "I knew that before you texted me this morning," she said. "I needed to decide if I was going to ask you." "And?" She held his gaze. "I'm asking you," she said. "Not because I can't find another way. Because you're the right person, and I trust you, and—" She stopped. "And?" he said quietly. "And because I think I'm done pretending I'm not choosing you," she said. "Every day, I keep choosing you. So I might as well be honest about it." The table between them felt very small. The restaurant noise seemed far away. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she repeated, like a door finally opening all the way. "I'll pull the resource allocation data for the last quarter tonight," he said. "Clean numbers properly categorized. You'll have it by morning." "Thank you." "And Maya." "Yeah, I've been choosing you too," he said. "Every day, in case you weren't sure." She didn't say anything, but she reached across the table and put her hand over his, briefly just a moment, and then took it back and picked up her sandwich and said, "You're going to make this difficult, aren't you?" "Absolutely," he said. "Good," she said quietly. "I'd hate for it to be easy." The next week was the week everything almost broke. It started on a Wednesday, the kind of gray, low-pressure Wednesday that feels like the atmosphere is holding its breath. Daniel was at his desk when his work calendar pinged with an urgent meeting invitation from Howard Briggs. Subject line: Resource Allocation Review, all department leads, in 30 minutes. He texted Maya. "Daniel, did you get a Briggs meeting invite just now?" Maya: "Yes. Do you know what it's about, Daniel?" "I have a guess." Maya Mullins. Daniel: "Yeah." I went back to his files, pulled the cleaned allocation data he'd prepared, and sent to Maya 3 days earlier. Made sure he had a copy on his laptop. Sent it to his personal email as backup. He was not going to be the man who showed up to a fight without his evidence organized. The meeting room filled at 11 sharp. Howard Briggs at the head, serious and slightly uncomfortable, which was his tell. Mullins beside him, controlled and prepared, which was his tell. Maya came in last, sat at the far end, and looked at no one for the first 15 seconds. She was dressed better than usual. Daniel noticed it immediately, not different, just more deliberate, the way someone dresses when they know they're walking into something. Briggs opened. "We've been reviewing Q3 resource allocations across divisions, and there are some discrepancies in the numbers I'd like to address directly." He looked at a paper in front of him. "The Vantage Division is showing significantly higher support costs compared to projected baselines." Mullins leaned forward. "I'd flagged this to Howard earlier in the week. The variance is significant enough to raise questions about efficiency at the operational level." Daniel watched Maya. She was still, completely still. "The numbers are accurate," she said, "and they're in context." She opened her laptop. "The concern," Mullins said, "isn't accuracy, it's interpretation, the cost per output ratio." "May I present the data?" Maya said. Her voice was flat and professional and completely controlled. Briggs nodded. What she showed them was the document Daniel had prepared, the cleaned, properly categorized resource allocation for Vantage cross-referenced, with every other division's real cost per output, including Mullins's department, which had a 17% higher support cost relative to revenue than Vantage in the same period. She presented it without commentary, without emotion, and let the numbers sit in front of every person in that room. Silence. Mullins looked at the screen. His jaw tightened. "Where did this data come from?" he asked. "Project Management's allocation system," Maya said. "Cross-departmental. It covers every division equally. This wasn't included in the report I submitted to Howard." "No," Maya said. "It wasn't." She paused one beat. "I added the missing context." Briggs looked at the data for a long time. Then he looked at Mullins. And Daniel watched the thing happen that happens when a decent man who's been comfortable too long finally understands that his comfort has been built on someone else's discomfort. Frank Briggs said carefully, "These numbers show that Vantage is operating at a lower cost ratio than 4 other divisions. The comparison methodology is the same methodology used across the board," Daniel said. Not loud, not aggressive, just stating what was in the files. Mullins turned, looked at him. The look of a man who had been outmaneuvered and knew it and was deciding who to blame. "I'd like to take a closer look at the cross-departmental data before we make any conclusions," Mullins said. "That seems reasonable," Briggs said. "Let's regroup Thursday." He looked around the table. "Good work on the preparation, Maya." It was not a grand exoneration. It was not dramatic justice. It was a decent man giving credit in a conference room on a Wednesday, quietly without fanfare, the way most of the important things happen, not in a single shining moment, but in the accumulation of small corrections. But it was enough. They filed out. Daniel was almost to the door when he heard Maya say his name behind him quietly enough that it was only for him. He turned. She looked at him with the open expression, the true one, the one underneath everything. "Thank you, Hugh," she said. "The data did it," he said. "You organized the data. You built the division that produced it." She shook her head slightly. Not dismissal. "I don't know how to do this," she said quietly. "Let someone help without losing myself in it." "You don't have to lose anything," he said. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He held her eyes. "Two people who are both completely capable of handling their own lives," he said, "who have decided they'd rather not have to." She looked at him for a long moment, and he thought about what Lily had said. She's been alone for a long time. Like you. And he thought about how loneliness has 2 shapes, the acute kind that arrives like a wound, and the chronic kind that settles in so gradually that you stop noticing it until the day something warm comes close, and your whole body recognizes what it has been missing. "Dinner," Maya said. "What?" "Not lunch, not the break room, not breakfast at your place." She held his gaze. "Dinner, just us, this weekend." He felt something shift. "Yes," he said. "I'll pick the place," she said. "Okay. Don't be late." "I'm never late." "I know," she said. And there was something in how she said it, warm and certain and slightly proprietary, that made it clear she had been paying attention to him for longer than either of them had fully acknowledged. She walked out. He stood in the empty conference room for a moment, and his heart was doing that thing again, that inconvenient, alarming, irreversible thing, and he let it. Friday night, Lily stayed at Mrs. Hendricks's apartment. She had packed her bag with the focused efficiency of a child who had clearly been anticipating this development and had opinions about it that she was wisely keeping to herself. On her way out the door, she said without looking at him, "Dad." "Yeah." "Don't be weird about it." "About what?" "Whatever happens." She turned and looked at him with Emma's eyes clear and direct. "You're allowed to have a good night." He looked at his daughter, 8.5 years old. 70 pounds of perception and grace. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said, and went. The restaurant Maya chose was small. The kind of place that doesn't advertise, that exists on word of mouth and quality, with tables close together and low light and a menu written on a chalkboard. He got there first this time specifically, and was sitting at the table when she walked in, and she was wearing the same yellow dress from the farmer's market. And she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, in the completely specific way that only happens when you have been paying close attention to someone for long enough that their beauty stops being about appearance and becomes about who they are. She sat across from him and said, "You're early." "I'm always on time," he said. "You're usually 30 seconds late." "Tonight I'm perfect," she said. "Tonight you're perfect," he agreed. She laughed, and it was the real laugh, the one that escaped before she could catch it. And they ordered and they talked, and somewhere between the appetizer and the main course, something that had been held at careful distance for weeks was no longer held at careful distance at all. It happened when she was telling him about her mother. Not the edited version, the real one. Her mother at 40 with bad knees and good humor, who used to dance in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching. Who had told Maya at 17, "Baby, don't let anyone's idea of what you should look like be louder than your own idea of what you're worth." She was telling it with the particular looseness of someone who has lowered a guard they didn't mean to lower, and her eyes were bright in the restaurant light, and she was looking at her glass instead of at him when she said, "I spent 20 years trying to live up to what she told me, and about half that time believing I was failing. And now," he said. She looked up. "Now I think I might finally be catching up," she said. He reached across the table. He put his hand over hers. She looked at their hands, then at him. "Daniel," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm still scared. I know that too. I don't do this gracefully," she said. I want things very much, and I'm not good at being careful about it, and that's gotten me hurt." "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not because I feel responsible for you. Not because you need me. Because I want to be where you are. That's the whole reason." She turned her hand over under his, and her fingers wrapped around his, and she held on, just held on the way. You hold on to something when you've been free-floating for long enough that solid ground feels almost unfamiliar. "Okay," she said. The same word as before. The same door, only this time all the way. They walked out together. Her hand in his, into the night air of a city that didn't know anything significant had happened and didn't need to. The significance was internal. The way all real things are, the kind that doesn't need witness because it already knows itself. On the corner she stopped and looked at him. "I need to tell you something," she said. He waited. "That night on the highway," she said, "when you stopped, I saw your car slow down and I thought, here we go. Here's the thing that happens where someone does something kind, and then I spend 6 months figuring out what it's going to cost me." She paused. "I was going to wave you off. I'd already decided to." "What stopped you? You didn't get out of the car right away," she said. "You just sat there, in the dark, like you were giving me the choice." She looked at him. "Nobody gives me the choice. They either drive past, or they come at me with the help before I've agreed to it. You just stopped and waited." He was quiet. "I noticed that," she said. "I noticed it, and I got in the car, and I've been thinking about it since." "About me waiting? About what it meant that you waited?" she said. "About what kind of person does that?" He held her gaze. "A person who grew up watching someone he loved refuse help because nobody offered it right," he said, "and learned that the offer matters as much as the help." She looked at him for a long time. Then she stepped close, and she kissed him there on the corner in the amber light of a street lamp on an ordinary Friday night in a city that kept moving around them without caring. And he put his hand against her face and kissed her back. And it was not like the movies, not dramatic, not scored, not lit. It was exactly what a real thing feels like, which is warmer and quieter and more specific than anything you can manufacture. When she pulled back, she looked at him and said, "I really did think you were flirting that night." "I was," he said. "You said you didn't know it yet." "I was wrong," he said. "I knew. I just wasn't ready to admit it." She shook her head, and she was smiling the full real version, the one that changed her whole face, and she said, "Take me home. Yours or mine?" "Mine," she said. "And then we'll figure out the rest." And they walked, her hand in his, into the particular darkness of a night that was ending into something neither of them had fully planned, and both of them had been moving toward for longer than they knew, and the city moved around them, ordinary and indifferent, and none of that mattered at all. Later that night, walking back to his car alone, he thought about what Lily had said. "We have enough space." I thought she was right. She had always been right. There had always been enough space. He had just needed to believe he was allowed to fill it. He drove home through Route 9, the same road, the same dark stretch past mile marker 14, and he didn't think about the night he'd seen a woman on her knees on the asphalt with her papers scattered and her dignity intact. He didn't think about it the way you don't think about the beginning of something when you're standing inside it and it has become simply your life. He thought I stopped seeing you as someone I needed to help. He thought I started seeing you as someone I wanted beside me. I didn't know yet that the hardest part was still coming. He didn't know about the morning 6 weeks from now, when Maya would call him from the hospital parking lot, voice flat and controlled, and not quite hiding the shaking underneath, because her mother had fallen, and the diagnosis that followed was the kind that changes the shape of everything. He didn't know about the night he would sit with her on her kitchen floor, because she needed to fall apart somewhere safe, and she had finally let him be that. He didn't know about Lily's nightmare that same week, the worst one in months, and Maya arriving at 7 in the morning with pastries and the yellow dress, and staying all day without being asked, without announcing it, just present just there. I didn't know yet that love is not a single moment on a corner under a street lamp. He didn't know it was all the ordinary Sundays, and the eggs and the farmer's market, and the data in the files, and the hand held on a sidewalk. But he was beginning to. He drove home through the dark, and the road was the same road, and he was not the same man, and that was not a tragedy. That was exactly what it was supposed to be. The call came on a Tuesday morning at 6:47, before Daniel's alarm, before coffee, before the day had declared itself anything. He heard his phone, and reached for it in the dark, and saw Maya's name, and picked up immediately, because Maya did not call before 7, unless something was wrong. "Hey," he said. Silence. Not empty silence. The kind with breathing in it. "Maya, I'm at Mercy General," she said. Her voice was the flattest he had ever heard it, flatter even than the day Mullins had tried to dismantle her in front of Briggs, flatter than the highway, flatter than all of it. "My mom fell last night. Her neighbor found her this morning." A pause. "They're saying it's a stroke." He was already sitting up. "How bad?" "They don't know yet." Another pause. "She's stable. They keep saying stable like it's supposed to mean something clear, and it doesn't." "I'm coming," he said. "You don't have to." "Maya." His voice was quiet and certain. "I'm coming." She didn't argue, which told him everything about how frightened she actually was. He woke Lily, who came awake fast, the way she always did when something in the house had shifted. He told her plainly Maya's mother was in the hospital, he needed to go. Lily sat up and said, "Call Mrs. Hendricks, I'll get my bag." No drama, no complaint. Just his daughter, 8.5 years old, moving through a hard morning with the grace of someone who had learned early that hard mornings required action, not commentary. He dropped Lily at Mrs. Hendricks's by 7:15 and was at Mercy General by 7:40. He found Maya in the third-floor waiting area, sitting in a plastic chair with her coat still on her hands in her lap, her coffee untouched on the chair beside her. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and for one full second, her face did the thing it never did in public. It cracked. Just for a second. Then she pulled it back together and stood, and he walked directly to her and put his arms around her, and she stood very still for a moment, like her body was remembering how to accept this, and then she held on. She didn't cry. He didn't expect her to, not here, not yet. But she held on for longer than she had ever held on to anything in front of him, and he felt the shaking she was working to contain, and he held her tighter. "She was alone all night," Maya said into his shoulder. "The neighbor found her at 5 in the morning. She was on the kitchen floor." "She's stable," he said. "I know what stable means, and I know what it doesn't mean." "Yeah," he said. "I know." They sat together for 2 hours, while the doctors ran tests, and the morning moved around them in the indifferent machinery of a hospital orderlies passing PA systems, crackling the institutional rhythm of other people's emergencies. He brought her a better coffee from the cart downstairs. She drank it. She told him about her mother, in the way people talk about someone when they're scared, not the edited version, the real one, the whole thing. Her mother's name was Beverly. She was 63 years old and had spent 40 of those years working jobs that paid enough to keep Maya in school clothes and weekend dance classes, and not enough to ever quite rest. She had bad knees and an excellent memory, and she sang off-key to everything, and she had never once in Maya's memory said the words, "I can't afford that," in front of her daughter, even when she clearly couldn't, because she had decided early that Maya would not grow up feeling the weight of their limitations. "She calls me every Sunday," Maya said. 8 o'clock. I could set a clock by it. "I know," Daniel said. He had heard the calls, had been present for several of them, sitting across from Maya at her kitchen table on the Sundays when he and Lily came for dinner, listening to Maya's side of the conversation, watching her face go soft in a way it did for almost no one else. "She's going to be so angry at me for worrying," Maya said. "Good," Daniel said. "Angry is fine." Maya almost laughed. Almost. "She's going to be furious that she frightened me. She hates that." She paused. "She'll probably apologize 4 times and then tell me to go back to work." "Sounds like you," he said. She looked at him. "I'm nothing like my mother." "You're exactly like your mother," he said. "In every way that matters." She looked away. He could see her processing that the way she processed compliments, slowly, carefully, like something she had to verify before she could accept it. The doctor came out at 9:15. The stroke had been moderate. Beverly had movement on both sides. Her speech was affected, but present. The next 72 hours would tell them more. The doctor was careful and precise, and Maya listened with the concentrated stillness of someone building a structure out of every word, making sure nothing fell. When the doctor left, Maya sat back down and stared at her hands. 72 hours, she said. "She's fighting," Daniel said. "She's always been fighting," Maya said. "That's the problem. She's been fighting her whole life, and she shouldn't have to fight this too." He didn't offer a counterpoint. He didn't tell her it would be okay. He sat beside her, and he was present, which was the thing she needed, and the thing he had learned to give without making it about himself. "I need to call my director," she said. "I need to tell them I won't be in." "I'll call Terrence," he said. "Daniel. I know his number. I'll tell him it's a family emergency." He held her gaze when she started to object. "Let me do this one thing. You call the hospital administrator about your mother's paperwork." She looked at him for a moment. "Then fine," she said, and pulled out her phone. He stepped into the hallway and called Terrence and handled it in 4 minutes, direct and without detail, the way Daniel handled everything efficiently, completely without waste. When he came back, Maya was still on the phone with the hospital administrator, her voice composed and clear, navigating insurance questions with the same focused precision she brought to everything. He sat down. He waited. He was good at waiting. When she hung up, she said without looking at him, "Thank you." "Sure. I mean, for being here." "I know what you meant." She finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were bright. Not crying. Maya Brooks did not cry in hospital waiting rooms. But the brightness was there, the tightness around her eyes, the held thing. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "Let people in when I'm scared. I always go quiet. I go into management mode and handle it and then fall apart later alone." "You called me," he said. "I almost didn't." "But you did." She held his gaze. "I did," she said. "That's new." He reached over and took her hand. She let him. That was new too. They sat in that waiting room for 4 more hours side by side, her hand in his, while the hospital moved around them, and Beverly Brooks rested in a room down the hall, and the morning became afternoon, became early evening. Lily texted at 3 o'clock. "How is Maya's mom?" Daniel showed Maya the text. She read it, and something moved across her face that was not quite manageable. "She texted you about my mom," Maya said. "She's been thinking about you all day," he said. Maya typed back herself. "She's resting. She's a fighter. Thank you for asking, baby." Lily's response came in 30 seconds. "Tell her I drew her a card. I'll give it to you tomorrow." Maya stared at the screen for a long time. Then she handed the phone back and stood up abruptly and walked toward the window at the end of the hall and stood there with her back to him. He gave her a minute. Then he walked over and stood beside her, and she said without turning, "I wasn't supposed to want this." "What?" "This." She gestured between them at the hospital, at the phone, at all of it. "I had a whole system. I was completely self-sufficient. I had built my life so that I didn't need anyone to show up for me, because needing that and not getting it is—" She stopped. "And now your daughter is drawing my mother a card, and you're in a hospital waiting room on a Tuesday that was supposed to be a regular workday, and I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything with it," he said. "It's just true." "It terrifies me." "I know." She turned to look at him. "What if something goes wrong?" she said. "Between us. What if this doesn't work, and Lily's attached, and your life is attached, and I've let all of this in, and then—" "Maya," he said. "Stop." She stopped. "Everything you're describing," he said. "The risk of it. The possibility that it could hurt." He looked at her steadily. "I know. I've thought about every version of it. I have a daughter who already loves you. I have a life that now includes you in it. The risk is real." He paused. "I'm choosing it anyway, because the other option is going back to before, and I'm not willing to do that." She searched his face. "Are you?" he said. A long moment. "No," she said quietly. "I'm not willing to go back either." "Then we're choosing it," he said. "Together, that's all." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he put his arm around her, and they stood at that hospital window. And it was not a romantic moment by any conventional measure. Fluorescent lights, the smell of industrial cleaner, the sound of a PA system down the hall. And it was one of the most important moments of his life. Beverly Brooks was moved to a step-down unit by Thursday. She was awake. She was communicating slowly with the concentrated effort of someone relearning a skill they'd had for 60 years. She was, as Maya had predicted, furious about the fuss. The first time Daniel met her was Saturday afternoon, 6 days after the fall. Maya brought him because Beverly had specifically asked to meet him, which Maya relayed with the studied neutrality of someone deeply aware of what the request implied. Beverly was in her hospital bed with her reading glasses on, looking at a word puzzle book that the occupational therapist had brought. She put it down when they came in and looked at Daniel with eyes that were unmistakably Maya's eyes. The same measurement, the same intelligence, the same refusal to be impressed until impressed. "You're the project manager," she said. Her speech was careful, deliberate, a little slow, but the precision behind it was sharp. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "My daughter doesn't use that word," Beverly said. "Ma'am." She seemed to approve of it anyway. "Mom," Maya said. "I'm talking to the man," Beverly said. She looked at Daniel. "She told me what you did, in that meeting, with the other man who was taking her work." Daniel glanced at Maya, who was studying the wall. "She told you that," he said. "She didn't tell me the way I just said it," Beverly said. "She told me like it was just a thing that happened. But I've known my daughter for 34 years. I know when something mattered to her." "It was the right thing to do," Daniel said. "It didn't take courage. The data was there." Beverly studied him. "She said you'd say something like that," she said. "Mom," Maya said again more firmly. "Sit down," Beverly said. "Both of you. I have a word puzzle and I have opinions, and I'm in a hospital bed, which means you have to listen to me." She pointed at the chairs. They sat. "You," she said to Daniel. "You have a daughter." "Lily," he said. "She's 8. She drew your mother a card." Beverly's expression shifted. "Did she?" "She'll bring it when you're home." Beverly looked at Maya. Something passed between them, a whole conversation, in a look the particular language of a mother and daughter who had been each other's primary person for a very long time. "She's good," Beverly said to Maya, not asking about Lily's health, asking something more specific. "She's remarkable," Maya said, quietly, genuinely. Beverly nodded once. She picked up her word puzzle. "You can stay," she said to Daniel. "For now." "That's high praise," Maya told him. I gathered, he said. Beverly looked up from her puzzle. I liked you better when you said ma'am, she said. He almost smiled. Yes, ma'am. She pointed at him with her pencil. That one I'll keep, she said. The weeks that followed. Beverly's stroke remade Maya in ways that were not dramatic and not announced the way real change rarely is. She took the train to Mercy General every other evening for the first 2 weeks. She coordinated Beverly's discharge, the home health aid, the occupational therapy schedule, the insurance appeals, the apartment modifications, all of it with the same meticulous thoroughness she brought to every project. Except this one lived in her chest in a way that professional projects didn't, and the stakes were of a completely different order. Daniel didn't try to manage any of it for her. He drove her to the hospital on the evenings he could. He watched Lily on the evenings she needed to stay late. He left food in her refrigerator twice without telling her which she discovered, and texted him about with, "There is a container of soup in my fridge that was not here before." He texted back, "Weird. Maya Daniel. Daniel. It was in the neighborhood. Maya. The soup was in the neighborhood. Daniel. It gets around." A long pause. Then, "Thank you. It's very good soup." He had made it Sunday afternoon while Lily did homework at the kitchen table and narrated his technique with the running commentary of someone who had inherited his attention to detail and needed an audience for it. At work, the Vantage division finished Q3 14% above projection. Maya presented the numbers to the executive team in October, and Carol Vance, who had joined by video, said at the end of the presentation, "This is what the division should have been 3 years ago." And then pointedly, "Good leadership makes a difference." Mullins was not in the room. Mullins had, in the quiet, bloodless way of institutional consequences, been moved to an advisory role that everyone understood to be a graceful reduction. Howard Briggs had done it without drama, which was the only way Howard Briggs did anything, and the floor had absorbed the change with the particular seamlessness of a system, correcting an error it had been tolerating too long. Maya came back to her desk after that meeting and sat very still for 60 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and called her mother. Daniel heard her voice from across the floor. He couldn't make out the words, but he could hear the tone, warm and slightly unsteady. The voice of a woman telling someone who needed to know that something they had both been waiting for had finally arrived. He went back to his work. He waited until she came to find him at 4 o'clock, which she did, appearing at his desk with her arms crossed and her chin up and her eyes bright. "The numbers landed," she said. "I know," he said. "I heard the room from here." Carol Vance said, "I know what she said. Terrence texted me." Maya stared at him. "Terrence texted you?" He was excited. He accidentally sent it to half the directory. He looked at her steadily. "Congratulations, Director Brooks." She uncrossed her arms. She looked at her hands for a moment. "I used to think that if I could just make the work undeniable enough," she said, "then the other stuff wouldn't matter. The way I look, the way people talk about me. If the numbers were big enough, the noise would stop." "Did it?" he said. "Not entirely," she said. "But it got quieter." She paused. "And I stopped needing it to be silent." He looked at her. "What changed?" "I stopped being the only person in my corner," she said simply, and didn't elaborate because she didn't need to, and he understood. And that was the kind of communication that took months to build and was worth every day of the building. The award ceremony was announced in November. The company's annual leadership recognition, and Maya's name was on the list for the Innovation and Impact Award, an award that had been given in its 8-year history to 6 people, all of whom had been men, all of whom had been in director roles for longer than 3 years. Maya found out from the company-wide email. She was at her desk when it landed, and Daniel watched her read it from across the floor. She read it once, set her phone face down, picked it up, and read it again, and then sat completely still for 30 seconds. He sent her a text. "Daniel, I saw." She didn't respond for 3 minutes. "Maya, I don't know what to do with this." Daniel, "You accept it. You get up in front of people. You let them see you." Maya, "That's the part that's hard." Daniel, "I know. Do it anyway." Another pause. Maya, "Will you be there, Daniel?" Where else would I be? Maya Lily Daniel. She's already asking what she should wear. He heard her laugh from across the floor. He didn't look up, but he was smiling at his screen. The night of the ceremony arrived in the particular way that significant nights arrive, with the feeling that everything ordinary has been cleared away to make room for something that the ordinary days have been building toward. Lily wore the blue dress she'd chosen herself and spent 45 minutes deciding on her shoes, which were ultimately the same shoes she wore every occasion, because she explained, the correct shoes for everything important. She sat in the back seat on the way over and said almost nothing, which meant she understood the weight of the evening and had decided to carry it quietly. Beverly was there. She came with her home health aide and her cane and her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. And when Maya saw her mother in the lobby, her face did the thing that no professional composure could fully cover: the raw, undefended love of a daughter who had been afraid she would lose this person and had not. "You didn't have to come," Maya said. "I know," Beverly said. "Sit down and stop telling me what I don't have to do." Lily appeared at Beverly's elbow. "I brought your card," she said, and produced from her small bag a folded piece of construction paper covered in careful crayon work. A woman in a hospital bed surrounded by yellow suns, which was Lily's symbol for good things. Beverly took it with both hands and looked at it for a long time. "You drew all these suns," Beverly said. "Yellow is the best color for getting better," Lily said with the authority of someone who had given the matter serious thought. Beverly folded the card carefully and put it in her coat pocket. "Sit next to me," she told Lily. Lily looked at Daniel. He nodded. She went and sat next to Beverly. Daniel stood with Maya for a moment in the lobby, the noise of arriving guests around them, the particular electricity of an evening that was about to ask something of her. "How are you doing?" he said. "I'm going to stand in front of 200 people," she said, "in about 45 minutes, and say something. Yeah. I've presented to rooms full of executives. I've defended data in front of people who didn't want to believe it. I've sat in a hospital waiting room for 14 hours. She looked at him. "Why does this feel harder?" "Because it's not about your work," he said. "It's about you. Being seen. Just you." She absorbed that. "I spent a long time making sure the work was the thing people had to look at," she said. "So they didn't look at me. And now I think..." She stopped. Tried again. "I think I'm done hiding behind it. The work is mine, but so is everything else." She straightened. "So is this." He looked at her. "Then go show them," he said. "All of it." She looked back at him with the open expression, the true one, the one he had first seen in full on the night she kissed him on the corner, and she said, "Thank you for stopping on Route 9. He felt the specific gravity of that. The highway, the dark. The papers on the asphalt. The woman on her knees who wasn't crying. The whole long road from that moment to this one. "Thank you for getting in the car," he said. She held his gaze for one more second. Then she squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked into the ballroom to go stand in front of 200 people and be completely undisguisedly herself. He found his seat next to Beverly and Lily. Beverly was doing the word puzzle she'd brought in her purse. Lily was reading the program with the concentration of someone studying for an exam. "She's going to be good," Lily said without looking up. "She's going to be great," Beverly said without looking up from her puzzle. Daniel sat between them and said nothing because there was nothing to add. The ceremony moved through its opening and its earlier awards with the patient momentum of such events. And then the MC said Maya's name, and the room turned, and Maya walked to the stage from the side entrance and stood at the podium and looked out at the room. She was wearing deep blue. Her shoulders were back. Her chin was level. She looked like someone who had arrived. Not arrived at an event, but arrived at herself, at the full occupancy of her own life, which is a different and rarer thing. She looked at the audience, and then her eyes found their table, found Beverly, found Lily, found him, and she held that for one moment that was only theirs. Then she spoke. She said, "I spent most of my career making sure the work was so good that no one had to look at me." Her voice was clear and steady. "I thought if the numbers were big enough, If the strategy was tight enough, if I was thorough enough, I could stay safe. I could succeed without being seen. She paused. I was wrong. The room was completely quiet. What I've learned, what this year taught me, is that being seen is not a vulnerability. It's the whole point. She paused again. You can't be chosen by the right people if you're hiding from everyone. You can't build something real if you're building it behind glass. She looked at her mother. Someone raised me to know my worth. It took me a long time to believe her. She looked at Lily. Someone reminded me what it looks like to be honest about what you need. She looked at Daniel. And someone stopped on a dark road when he didn't have to, and waited, and let me decide. She took a breath. That's what this award is really about. Not the numbers. The people who made the numbers possible by making me possible. She looked back at the full room. I accept this for every woman who has made her work undeniable so she could stay invisible, she said. It's time to come out from behind it. The work is ours, so is the credit, so is the room. The applause started before she finished the sentence. It filled the space full and sustained, and Beverly pressed her lips together hard, and Lily clapped with the focused intensity she brought to everything important. And Daniel sat very still in his chair and felt the specific thing that happens when you watch someone you love become fully themselves in front of witnesses. After the ceremony in the lobby, Beverly took Maya's face in both hands, her stroke-side hand slower but certain, and held it, and didn't say anything for a moment. And Maya stood inside her mother's hands and didn't try to make it smaller. Good girl, Beverly said finally. The way she'd been saying it for 34 years. The way it meant everything. Mom, Maya said. And her voice was the voice of the daughter, not the director, not the professional, not the woman who had spent years making her work a shield. Just Maya. Just her. Daniel looked away. Some moments belong only to the people inside them. Lily appeared at his side and took his hand without comment. He looked down at her. She was watching Maya and Beverly with those eyes. Emma's eyes clear and earnest and old, in the way that children who have lost things are sometimes old. She's okay now, Lily said quietly. Yeah, he said. She is. Are you okay? He looked at his daughter. The question landed in him the way Lily's questions always did, direct and genuine. No performance, no angle, just the truth-seeking of someone who loved him and wanted to know. Yeah, Lil, he said. Better than okay. She leaned against his arm. Good, she said. It's about time. He laughed once quietly. Later, when Beverly had been taken home by her aide, and Lily was asleep in the back of the car on the drive home, Maya sat in the passenger seat with her award in her lap and her shoes off and her head back against the headrest. The road was quiet. The same county roads, the same direction, the same dark stretching out ahead. Daniel, she said. Yeah. Pull over for a second. He looked at her. She was looking out the windshield. He pulled over onto the shoulder, not Route 9, but close enough, and the car idled in the dark. She turned to look at him. I have something for you, she said. She reached into her bag and produced a small flat package wrapped in brown paper tied with a piece of twine. The wrapping careful and specific in the way Maya did everything. He took it, unwrapped it. It was a photograph. Printed and framed, simple dark wood. The photograph was taken from a distance, slightly grainy. In the way phone photos taken at night are grainy, but clear enough. It showed a stretch of dark highway, Route 9 mile marker 14, he knew it immediately. And on the shoulder, barely visible, a car pulled over with its hazard lights on, and two figures. One crouched, gathering something from the ground, and one standing nearby, not rushing, not looming, just there. He stared at it. How did you get this? He said. The gas station on Route 9 has a security camera that covers the shoulder, she said. I asked them. They sent me the footage. I had a frame made. She paused. That's us. That's the moment. He looked at the photograph for a long time. The two figures. The scattered papers. The hazard lights throwing their amber rhythm into the dark. You kept this, he said. I ordered the frame the week after it happened, she said quietly. I wasn't ready to give it to you yet. I didn't know what it would mean yet. She held his gaze. I know now. He looked at her. What does it mean? It means you stopped, she said. When you didn't have to. It means you waited when most people would have rushed. It means... She paused. It means everything started here, and I wanted you to have it. He held the frame in both hands. The photograph was not dramatic. It was not beautiful in any conventional sense. It was a dark road, and two small figures, and amber light, ordinary, and quiet, and completely specific. It was the most meaningful thing anyone had given him since Emma. He set it carefully on the dashboard. Then he reached over and took Maya's face in his hands, the same way Beverly had held hers, and he looked at her in the dark of the car. This woman who had asked him if he was flirting from the asphalt of a highway and been exactly herself every day since. I love you, he said. He hadn't said it before. He said it now because it was the exact truth, and the time for being careful about it was behind them. Maya's breath came in slightly, the small sound of something arriving that you've been waiting for without saying. I know, she said. That's not the response, he said. She looked at him, and he saw it in her face before she said it, saw it fully, without the guard, without the armor, without the careful measuring of someone who had been hurt enough times to stop trusting her own wanting. I love you, she said. I've been choosing you every day for months. I think that probably counts. It counts, he said. Good, she said. He kissed her in the dark on the shoulder of a county road while Lily slept in the back seat and the hazard lights blinked once, twice, steady and patient. The way they had once blinked on a different road, on a different night when everything was beginning. He drove the rest of the way home in the particular quiet of a life that has become what it was supposed to be. Not perfect, not finished, not without the hard mornings and the hospital waiting rooms and the nightmares that still came sometimes and the work still left to do. But real. Chosen. Built by two people who had separately learned to carry everything alone and had finally decided that they didn't have to. He carried Lily inside without waking her and laid her in her bed and stood in her doorway for a moment, the way he always did. She was already deeply asleep. Her breath, even her face unguarded and peaceful. He thought about the map she had painted with her eyes closed. The map that went nowhere. The place that existed only for her. He thought it didn't go nowhere, it went here. Maya was in the kitchen when he came back down her award on the counter, a glass of water in her hand, her shoes still off entirely herself, in the space that had become over months of Sundays and farmers markets and hard mornings and good eggs, also hers. She looked at him when he came in. She okay? Maya said. She's good, he said. She's great. Maya nodded, set down her glass. I should go, she said. You don't have to, he said. She looked at him. The question was in the look, and the answer was in his face, and they had been reading each other long enough now that no more words were needed to establish. This was not just dinner, not just a Saturday, not just a borrowed hour in someone else's life. This was the life. Hers, his Lily's Beverly's, all of it connected and imperfect and chosen. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. And that was the whole of it. That simple word said in a kitchen on an ordinary night by two people who had found each other on a dark road and had the sense and the courage to stop. Not because they needed rescuing. Not because they were broken or lonely or desperate, though they had been all of those things. But because choosing someone fully with your eyes open, knowing the weight of it and accepting it anyway, that was not weakness. That was the whole point. That was what it meant to be human and trying and finally willing to let something matter. Maya Brooks had walked into Daniel Carter's life on her knees, on an asphalt shoulder in the dark papers, everywhere. Dignity intact, asking a stranger if he was flirting with her, and the answer it turned out had always been yes. He just hadn't known it yet. And she had known it first probably, and had gotten in the car anyway. And that was the truest thing about her. She was brave enough to get in the car. They both were. And that made all the difference.